Darling? So what did we learn about? You tell me.
We learned about two things that Captain Cook suggested Norfolk Island would be useful for, were the flax and the Norfolk pine. The flax he suggested would be used as, could be turned into sails, and the Norfolk pine could be used as masts for the ships. They got quite a few masts for the ships until they'd chopped all those trees down that were in the deep forest, and then not so much anymore, because when they regrew they had access to the sun, and so they grew branches. And then for the flax, it was a lot more labour intensive than they expected, but they ended up using it. They still exported the flax eventually and did it processing and stuff, but they didn't use it for the sails. It's quite amazing.
So when they finally found the flax, they didn't know how to weave it, so they had to go to New Zealand, kidnap a couple of people, bring it back to here to teach them how to weave. Problem is, and this happens with many a pom, they kidnapped two men, brought them all the way over here. When they got here, the men said, "We don't do weaving, it's the women."
You remember those two reasons why Philip, when he came out with the first fleet, came to Norfolk Island. He sent Philip Gidley King here as the first governor. He wanted to win the pine and the flax because they had been reported as being prospects for commercial purposes. King, when he arrived here as the first governor, had his men immediately look for the flax. Looked everywhere for this. This is a flower. Looked everywhere. He records that he looked amongst the local iris, looking for this. Now this doesn't grow here, so obviously he didn't find it. But he searched amongst the local iris. The local iris, remember when we paused at the Kingston Pier, and Stuart probably showed, because you're from his bus, probably showed you towards the seaward side this little crop of flax. Yes? Remember seeing that? It was this. Now remember, I also said to you that they looked amongst the local iris looking for the flax. This is what they referred to as the local iris. They searched for weeks looking for the non-existent here amongst this, what they were really searching for. When they decided, fine, oh, this is what we're actually looking for, then they started to utilise this in the same way, process it, that you utilised it and won the European flax. In other words, they retted it, put it in water to rot away the green material. Tried to card it, it didn't work, and that puzzled them.
And the European, is that what they make linen from?
Yes. And it didn't work, and they then were very puzzled about this. But they then worked out, or King worked out, that the reason that Cook had recommended this was because Cook, on his travels of discovery, had noted in New Zealand the Maori people actually extracting fibre from this. And so he thought that they would make rope and sails from that. Now when King then worked that out, he then sent a ship from Norfolk Island to New Zealand, captured two Maoris and brought them to Norfolk Island. Show us how to work the flax. Now they were two men. Show us how to work the flax, please. I like to think that these two men chuckled at that moment. They were able to say, we know nothing whatsoever about working the flax, or that's women's work, or that's nothing to do with us at all. Now those two men were returned to New Zealand. But, notwithstanding that, they did work out how to do it, they the Europeans, but not successfully, or not on a grand scale. They weren't able to process it in sufficient quantity or quality to really make a mark. And so they gave it away and decided that they wouldn't do that anymore. They did decide, however, that what we're going to do is we're going to organise with the Maori people in New Zealand, we'd say contract today, to extract the fibre, and then we, the Europeans, will export that fibre to Europe. And they did that. And that export of the fibre went until the 1970s, so reasonably recent times. It was therefore a reasonable product. Why did it cease? Because man-made products came onto the market, plastic string and the like, which replaced this. So what I want to try and do in a very abbreviated way this morning is, how did the Maori people extract fibre from this leaf? Well, the first thing is you've got to get the right leaf. It needs to be a leaf that is sufficiently developed. So I'm just doing a portion of the leaf. The Maoris do the totality of the leaf. And once you've done one side, then it's a matter of then going to the other side and equally removing green material. Now I mentioned that it would take hours on their part. I've got a minute and a half. But I think we're at the stage of being able to just briefly show you what happens. It was peculiar to this place, it grew abundantly, grew quickly, tall, but it grew in a forest environment, and a forest here in those times was an absolute dense forest. And in a dense forest there's no light down here. The light is all at the top. And therefore when you have light, that's when you can have branches and trees and leaves. No leaves down here in the forest. So a pine tree, when it grows in that context, grows well and quickly, fairly constant trunk. Only leaves up here, and the pine trunk down in the forest is clean. There are no branches. Now a clean trunk is very, very, very suitable as a mast. That was success, marked success. King's men got from the forest hundreds of those, and that was really a success story. But as time went on, and they won from the forest all of those pines, they also took from the forest pines for timber. The forest became less dense. Down here, less dense. And when it becomes less dense, light permeates. And the pine tree still grows well in that environment. Grows quickly, tall, all of those things. But no longer just at the top do you have light, you also have light down here. This was earlier a clean trunk. But when you have light down here, leaves and branches grow on this earlier clean trunk. And when leaves and branches grow on that trunk, they look like this. Full of these branches, trunk of tree, another crop here, another crop here. This earlier clean trunk is now full of these. These are a fault in terms of a mast. A mast like with that full of those is not suitable at all. The last suitable pines taken, Norfolk Island, for masts, was the 1856 pine. Now 1856, you'll remember, Pitcairn's arriving. Now when the Pitcairn's arrived, there was a Royal Naval vessel here, HMS Herald, to facilitate that process. And they recalled that they took from the forest masts, 11 of them, pines for masts, I should say. That's the last documentation we have. Now, no doubt they may have taken some at a later time, but that's the last documentation we have. So you can see, fairly Czechoslovakia were those two original purposes. A bit of a fail with the flax. Wonderful marks in the first instance for the pine, but as time went on, it proved not to be so. But having said all of that, the pine is still a fairly valuable piece of timber. Structural work. External, internal cladding. You saw furniture, the furniture in there, the display cabinets are of pine. It's used for roof construction and also for shingles, in other words, roof cladding.
If you like this video, you know what to do. Give us a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button. See you next one.